Well, we were told that CCP started by inviting what in the West we will call professional anti-cultists, member of anti-cult associations. They made some mistakes because, for instance, they invited a gentleman called Rick Ross without realizing he had a very long criminal record and not a criminal record for being a little bit violent against cults only, but he started his career just as a common criminal, robbing jewelries. So, and the Chinese apparently were not aware of it. We told this detail. But in general, members of the anti-cult associations in the West are willing to cooperate with CCP as they cooperate with Russian government and with anybody which is against cults, and they do not normally have the intellectual tools to understand the difference between CAGR and cults. Only our impression is, or my impression at least, is that at some stage CCP realized that cooperating only with professional anti-cultists in the West was not very impressive, because everybody knows these people, everybody criticizes cults they are in favor of, and they are not very prestigious in the West. So to invite these people was not very useful to clean the image of CCP as an institution not respecting religious liberty. So they decided to work with the scholars. And I will here make a distinction, because I'm aware the CCP organized some initiative with scholars to criticize Falun Gong. And there are scholars in the West who don't like Falun Gong. So these initiatives more or less were useful for CCP, because they find a few scholars in the West who went to China and specifically said what or spelled out what they do not like in Falun Gong. Then I believe a different part of the CCP establishment invited scholars not of Falun Gong, but of new religious movements in general, with the aim particularly to criticize the Church of Almighty God. And I would say this initiative backfired spectacularly. It was a complete failure from the point of view of the CCP, and I believe somebody perhaps would even be called by his bosses to say, why the heck did you spend some money for this? Because I would say almost all the scholars who went there and were supplied by documents from CCP, we read the documents and we say, you know what, these documents prove that what you say is not true. So I, for instance, wrote an article on the McDonald's murder in Zhaoyuan. My article is based on documents published by the CCP. It's not based on documents supplied by the Church of Almighty God. But my conclusion is Church of Almighty God didn't do it. It was a different group. And the same is true for many other stuff. I mean, CCP does have a problem. If they invite anti-cultists or even disreputable anti-cultists, they will say everything the CCP asks them to say, but they're not very believable or authoritative. So it's not very useful for CCP propaganda in the West. If they invite serious scholars, Scholars, and they had this experience. In the end, they were a little bit annoyed. Say, please give us the documents. If they are in Chinese, we will have people to will translate for us. Just give us the documents, and we will not say anything until we study the documents. But if they invite serious scholars and serious scholars study the documents, they may come to completely different conclusions. So I believe in the case of the two initiatives about the Church of Almighty God, they organized in Zhengzhou and in Hong Kong, they largely backfired because they induced people like me or Professor Falk to study the Church of Almighty God. Seriously, I never studied the Church of Almighty God before. And I came to conclusions which are largely opposite to the conclusions of CCP. So they really, it would perhaps have better for them to have been better for them to let the sleeping dogs lie, because they invited the people they cannot control, and people came to different conclusions from those they suggested. And the only explanation I have for that, because CCP is not stupid, is to some extent it worked for Falun Gong. Because Falun Gong antagonized the many Western scholars by attacking them and criticizing them. And so for Falun Gong, in a way, it worked. But for Church of Almighty God, largely it did not work.